Appreciate that. Alrighty, thanks everyone. This is great. The 100th year of the garden club. Now I got this nice old logo. This is the old one. So I figured I didn't want to get the new one since we're talking about 100 years of history. But yeah, it's pretty cool. And so nice that we've got this far, and we're still going. And so, just a little history on myself, as Don was mentioning that we got together in '86. I started my career back in 1979. Ouch, that tells you something. I started out working in a landscape business in the Cranbrook area, and just working after schools and on holidays and whatnot. And then eventually I was too scrawny, so they put me in the greenhouse to do work in the greenhouse. And that really got me addicted to plants. It was just unbelievable. It was just an instant connection. So since then, I've developed growercoach.com. We do the garden show, as we say, it's been run since 1983. Podcasts we do every Sunday morning. You can pick up the podcast on YouTube as well under Grower Coach. Got lots of videos there to check out, and our KHS Landscape Design Professionals still cruising along. I don't want to take too much time, but there's a picture when we were young. Anyway, things are changing. Again, the KHS Landscape Professionals, we do a lot of different landscaping things and maintenance, that sort of thing, irrigation. But hey, breaking news. Now, today we're talking about the future. So the future, this is what's really important. And we're talking about, obviously, vegetable gardening as well. But all this is going to tie together. And I just thought, well, I'd do some breaking news first, just sort of some updates as to some technology that's coming down the pipes. And so we go directly to this, the hyperspectral eyes. This is it's not really scary. This is just a unit that looks at plant material, and it can tell if the plant has any disorders. And it can tell if the plant needs nutrients or water, or it's got a lot of different uses. And it's used in professional growing. So that's where we're starting out, is sort of what are the pros doing? And this is one of the things, it's used a lot in the vertical farming, which is vertical farming. You can see the pictures in the background at the top there. And there's all kinds of these vertical gardens showing up everywhere. And they're happening inside buildings, a lot of them. They can be done in greenhouses as well, but often it's right inside of a building. And it's kind of cool, but really nice to have this kind of technology so that it can actually be literally plant specific or area specific. So as it goes along, it'll scan the entire greenhouse every day or a couple times a day, telling you what nutrients the plants need. It's kind of interesting. Now, other new things, new tomato hybrids that are heat and drought tolerant. So what they've done is they found these varieties of tomato plants from the desert. They're not actually really look like tomatoes like we know of them, but they're a close relative, and they've done their cross hybridizing and whatnot of the plants, and they've developed tomatoes now that can live literally with or without water, and super heat tolerant, and that whole thing. So really nice to have that. If the temperatures are getting warmer, it's probably not a bad idea. The only thing that I'm finding, and I don't know, I guess probably nobody listened to the radio show this morning, but I was talking about how some of the new hybrids and whatnot, and you'll find with these massive companies that develop these things, that unfortunately, they're developing things like this, like plants that'll survive in extreme conditions and whatnot, but they're missing out on the flavor, which everybody says, oh, it tastes like cardboard. And it's like, yeah, no kidding. The other thing about the cardboard taste is that they've linked the taste of plants or a taste of fruits and vegetables with their nutrient value. So tomatoes that taste delicious are full of nutrients, and tomatoes that have very little taste have very little nutrients. And they found, well, that was pretty much the same right across the board with all the vegetables. So I really like that idea, and I thought, that's why we grow the vegetables at home. And when you go out and pick it and you cook it right away, it's just no comparison. I mean, it's so delicious. And when you're eating that delicious food, you're getting nutrients that are packed. And it's actually, the difference is actually, there's 30% less nutrients. A total, 70% less nutrients in some of these hybrid varieties. So when you go to CD Sunday next week, or 2 weeks from now, that's where you'll see a lot of these people who sell the heritage varieties, and those ones are fully packed with nutrients. And you grow them in your own garden, and away you go. You're off to the races. Okay, so peat moss is on its way out. In Europe, it's actually already out. There's very little, if any, left there. And so now I'm pretty sure they've actually ruled it out completely. So now they have new products that are available. And there's a few new companies coming on board now. One's called Hydrofiber. It's a name like you would find with potting soils or whatever. So you will see that starting now, and you'll see that a lot in the coming future, and not very far off. So peat moss is harvested, and it just runs out basically. And so there's going to be new products coming down the pipes, and it means that we're going to be, let's say, we shouldn't be afraid to try new things. And at very least, I like to see potting soils that are a percentage of the coconut coir. So we've already been using them in our company for, I think, 2 years now, where we're using a blend. So we buy it purposefully. It's a little more expensive, but it's a really great product. Works really well. So what else is new? Holy, well, they're starting to use UV light now to kill plant pests and diseases. And so this is something that even for a homeowner, this is the hobby unit. You can see it written on the box. This is something that the home gardener can get. I think it plugs in, but this is a unit that gives off UV light. And you follow the directions and whatnot. I'm not sure if this is available here yet, or what else. This information is from Europe, and they have this available now. And basically, it will kill insects, and it kills diseases. And a really good disease that we all know is powdery mildew. And what do we know about powdery mildew is that you can't kill it once it starts. You can't reverse it once it gets going. No, you can kill it with this particular light. By using UV light, it will actually kill the disease. So it's the first time that that's ever been seen. So it's not a chemical or anything, it's completely organic. So it's kind of a cool idea, I think. And so speaking of lights, also ionized lights. So these lights give off this ionization. So if anybody knows, I've heard of it like ionization. It occurs in lots of different things. You can do powder coating of your steel. Don, you know that one. So when you're powder coating, they charge the particles a certain charge, and then the metal is a different charge. And like one would be positive, one would be negative, and they attract together. So what these lights do, they can be in a greenhouse like this, and they just leave them on through the daytime. And all the diseases, including viruses, bacteria, fungus, all the diseases that are floating around as spores, they all get their charges set up, and then they're attracted to surfaces of things like the metal benches, the walls, the ground. So they immediately get attached to the ground or these surfaces. So it really greatly reduces the spread of disease. So I thought, this is a great idea. And the quality of the lights, these are the best lights that you can buy. They actually are very, very similar to actual natural sunlight. So cool. I like that idea. What? Glow in the dark plants? Maybe you've seen this around, but this is a whole series of plants that are coming down the pipes that glow in the dark. So how cool is that? I don't know how practical it is. The Firefly petunias are something that's a new plant. I believe there was 50,000 cuttings that were becoming available in the US this year. I'm not 100% sure if they're going to be in Canada yet. It might take a little while. We might be looking at maybe next year or the following year, but I just know it's going to be popular. I have no idea what colors they are or anything. The only pictures I could find were pictures of them glowing in the dark. So apparently they're kind of a greenish color, but we'll see. It's a pretty cool plant, and I just think that's popular. And if I had a garden center or something, I'd want to have lots of these in stock because whether it's a gimmick or not, like why not? If you had them on your deck or on a veranda or something, and they're just glowing away all night, not a bad idea, I guess. All right, so yeah, so here we go. So use of a sensor to track the residue on fruits to make for safer consumption. So it's amazing, but they actually have these little sensors that they can clip onto the fruits. And as the fruits are being, if there's any treatments that go on, whether it's foliar feeding or sometimes they have to use a pesticide of some sort to keep the bugs off. This little sensor will tell you what the status is on that, and to make sure that they don't sell them before they have, before their residues have reduced. And so it again just makes a safer product. Ah, yes, insect nets, my favorite topic. So we know that insect nets reduce insects incredibly well. You can put it over top of your vegetable beds and you literally get no bugs, at least nothing that flies in. I mean, you still get some earwigs and slugs and that kind of thing, but anything that flies in, they're gone. They found out by doing tests with different types of insect netting, they made them all different colors so that they have, they tried them all different colors. Well, lo and behold, the red was the best color. The red color, the insects wouldn't even go near it. Never mind crawl into it or try to get in or anything. So they've now, I believe that's going to be a big change in the near future, is that when you buy your insect netting, which I'll show you some pictures of some netting here. And yeah, it'll all be turning red. Why not? Just keep the bugs away, right? Sensors. We all talk about everything these days that's wireless. Everything is wireless. Here's my wireless pointer clicker dealie. This is a sensor that you literally just set on your plants, like if you were growing some plants. You can set it on there and it's wireless and it connects up to your computer and it actually can tell you when the plant is in need of water. And so it actually works through a computer. And in greenhouse situations, they hook it straight up to the computer system and to their irrigation. And so that people don't have to water. It just automatically tells the computer, oh, these plants need water now, and it sends water to those plants. So again, that's one of the big expenses for most greenhouse operations and for garden centers and that sort of thing, is that they are always sending people out with hoses, constantly trying to water everything. So it's a challenge, but this is one of the things that will really greatly help, especially in the wholesale end. If they had huge greenhouses full of plants, you might have one of these like every 20 feet all through the greenhouses. They're very inexpensive, and yeah, another wireless thing, right? I wonder if there's a remote for that. All right, so the Foodscape Revolution is what's happening right now, and it's been happening for a couple of years. Is that people are just really finding the benefits of growing their own food and just doing whatever. It can be at any level or any scale, but it just seems like more and more people are growing their own food. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we continue on. But ultimately, it's become a big part of landscaping. And I think it's variable. There's so much variability in landscaping, but I think that you can make these gardens so beautiful looking and absolutely full of vegetables and edible plants. And you can have gardens that are actually a combination where you have ornamentals and edibles. Right. The only thing that I do when it comes to this type of a garden is I separate plants that are perennials that come back year after year after year, like your vegetable or like your, say, blueberries or raspberries or blackberries. Those are coming back year after year, so they don't need quite as much water. They still need water, but not nearly as much. But when it comes to the annual plants, like regular vegetables, they need a pretty steady water supply. So that's the only separation that I like to do, is sort of keep them a little bit different. We've had them all mixed together in installations in the past, and it was okay. We just would have areas we would designate for annuals, and it would have its own drip lines. that were on a zone that runs once per day for 10 minutes on a drip zone. And then these other plants that would be even things like garlic, they don't, it doesn't like so much water. Same with onions. So what we would do is set those up to run every second day or every third day. So, but all about food production, and yeah, I really enjoy that part. But I find that the vegetables are beautiful. Like I don't know, like even though I tend to look around the weeds and stuff, I just look at the plants. They're beautiful and they're always blooming and producing fruit, and it's just awesome. So there's a little shot. So yeah, food is very expensive. It's one of the reasons why we want to grow our own food and grow more vegetables is just because of the cost. It can be incredibly expensive. And ultimately, who knows where it came from, And that was the thing I was just saying about the nutrient value in some of these plants, right? Where they're hybrid varieties that are grown for certain farms, and not that there's anything wrong with getting from some of these growers. I'm just thinking maybe the really big growers, and they're getting these seeds that don't have a lot. There's not a lot. They're all hybrids. They don't have a lot of nutritional value. But yeah, if you know where it came from, if it came out of your yard or just out of a pot that's outside your door, fabulous. It's going to be way better. So yeah, it's an amazing thing is growing your own stuff, and you can see there's a little bit of the insect fabric there. And the beauty of the insect fabric, again, like, I'll grow one of these. These are 4 feet by 8 foot beds typically. And I'll put that insect screen on right when I plant it. And it never comes off for the whole year. And I have drip lines inside. So it's just drips, like I say, 10 minutes once a day sort of thing, and off when it's raining. But wow, so nice. Grow spinach with no leaf miners. Like I love it. The onions right here closest to the bottom of the screen, that's an onion bed. It's all onions. And guess what? No onion maggots. No anything. Just beautiful, healthy plants. No sprays, no nothing. So love it. Carrots, no carrot rust fly. Can you imagine? No carrot rust fly. Plant them really early. Carrots are a cold crop. The plant likes to grow cold. So why not get them started early? Well, the old thought was don't plant them too early because the carrot rust flies are going to get on them in the month of May. So wait till June 1st to plant carrots. Nah, get some insect cloth, some insect fabric, put that over top of it, and you're good to go. And you just get them planted. The water goes straight through that stuff. So you just stand there with a hose. It doesn't even splash or anything. It just goes straight through. So love it. Fertilizing or adding in things. I do the no dig method. So we're going to talk more about no dig gardening. And yeah, great. The only thing that'll change is all the meshes will be red in the future. Not quite as nice. I kind of like the white, but we'll see. Anyway, so grow when you can, where you can, and what you can. Ultimately, it doesn't matter if it's a small amount or a large amount. It doesn't really matter. Little tiny carrots or just about anything. It's just nice to have a little bit of something, and whether it's in pots or whatever you can do. I mean, container growing is awesome. It's just amazing what you can do in a pot. And some plants, like I find peppers and tomatoes actually do really well in pots and containers due to the warmth, because they're up above the ground, so that the root systems get nice and warm, and they seem to really like that. Other plants, like there's some romaine lettuce there in the middle, and that's a plant we could plant right now. Like they love to be cold. They want to be outside. They don't mind to freeze a little bit, And same with it looks like bok choy on the one side there. Really important to know differences between your cold plants that love to be cold and want to stay cold, and those plants that are really heat lovers. And we really have to watch that. So if anything else today, remember basil, everybody grows basil like crazy. It does not like to be in conditions that are colder than 12 degrees Celsius. So where is that? That's for us. That is in probably first week of June if you're lucky. Depends, it's from year to year. You do get some warmer nights, but that's an example why most people have failures with plants like basil. just wrong conditions, or they get them too early. But you can grow them inside because they love the room temperature. It's actually not bad inside. So I guess one of the other things that we can take away from today is some of these plants that potentially we could grow inside. And like basil, it's nice to have a little grow light. I mean, I put the plants right in front of a window, my biggest window. It faces either south or west. West is ideal. And then I put a grow light on it too. So I have just a little grow light, and it's getting light coming in the window, because in Canada here, we don't have a lot of light in the wintertime. And yeah, you can get plants doing quite well when it's all about light. We have temperature when we're inside. We can add fertilizer, but we can't adjust temperature easily. When you're inside, you've got the temperature. It's locked in, good to go. So containers are great. There's a lot of sort of little tricks to it, and the number one trick is always about potting soil. And what happens is a lot of people like to make their own potting soils, and I don't have any problem with that. I just think that the science that goes into making potting soil is quite intense, actually. And so now, especially if we're going to start to lose peat moss, here's some cocoa coir there that can be used. You could buy something like that and make your own potting soil. But when you buy a pre-mixed product, they're already doing two things. Number one is it's all about porosity. So they're going to make sure that there's enough oxygen in that soil to be beneficial to the roots of the plants. So what we do is we get those plants into the pots, and the roots go in, and they can breathe lots of oxygen. Because remember, roots breathe oxygen. But the other issue is it's in a pot. So because it's in a pot, it can't go out and search for its own water. Like when you have something in the garden and it starts to dry out a bit, it'll send out some roots, and maybe go deeper or maybe go wider and find a moist spot where it can pick up a little bit of moisture retention ability. So that your soils have to hold moisture. And that's the one thing when you take, say, just dirt out of the earth, that's a mineral soil, and you put it into a pot, it doesn't have much of that moisture holding ability. And it's also a bit of a mystery of whether it has enough pore space. So what we're looking for is 25% of the volume of that pot should be air. It should be oxygen and air, so it can have gas exchange. So really, really important, and peat moss is really good at that. And that's why now that we're shifting away from peat moss, we're going to see some slight changes. But again, the factories or the companies that produce this, they better be knowing this information. I don't want to have to go down there. It's very easy to test for porosity. It's a very simple process. I'm not going to talk about it today because I do have, I do talk about making potting soils and testing for porosity in other ways. It's a bit of a deal. It's easy to do though. So peat was really good. And now that we're adding in the coconut coir, the cocoa coir, is that it's going to add we're going to have different percentages of things. And yeah, so we have to really adapt to what we have access to. And one of the reasons that coconut coir is there is because it's one of the biggest products that's available over the whole planet, and it's completely renewable. And they just get more and more and more of it. And they started to use it for all different types of things, making cloth out of it and fabrics and rugs and carpets and roadways. They have roadways made of coconut coir. You can roll it out. But like the one thing that coconut coir has an advantage over peat is that peat, when you add water to it, you might have noticed it beads. Like it doesn't want to get attached to the peat. So it's like, we call it hydrophobic or hygrophobic. So that means that it literally repels the water. But coconut coir is the opposite. It attracts water, so it absorbs water. That's why even when you mix this with the peat soils, it makes the peat soils better. It makes them absorb water quicker and easier. So many, many advantages. So yeah, so top tip is plants in pots need more food. And so, like I was saying, when you have a plant that's in the garden, it can chase around and look for nutrients and water underground. It's got this unlimited area that it can find it's whatever it needs to sustain itself right in that environment. But when you're in a pot, you're kind of trapped. Not to mention, most potting soils, we were just talking about potting soils, they're really mostly inert materials. Like they don't really have any actual soil in them. They are really a soilless mix. And that's what they call it, a soilless medium. No actual soil. So you need to feed. What you feed with is up to you, but just remember that you got to feed regularly. And by that, I know that if you can get a product that you can really have control of, not a bad idea just to have a small amount in every watering can. So you're watering literally every time you water. And so it's nice to use rainwater if you can. But yeah, the thing with these containers is really there's no limit to what you could use. You could use anything. You could even just use a wooden box if you wanted to. But the trick is all about drainage, so the water can go through the soil and come out the bottom. And in this case, one of the things we found, on the one side we have these round black pots, and those are nursery pots. So they would be, sometimes, I'm not going to say they're discarded, but there seems to be a lot of nursery pots around. So if you do have some available, they make excellent pots for growing plants. And one noticeable thing as far as drainage goes is that the drain holes are on the sides of the container, not so much on the bottom. There are some that have holes in the bottom, and they're actually used for a specific type of watering system that fills up from underneath. But in general, most nursery pots have the holes in the sides at the bottom, and that's a far superior way to drain a pot. So if I took maybe a container of some sort and I was going to, I'm going to make this into a pot. So one thing I would do is just basically drill from the side all the way around the bottom of the pot, and that would be adequate for really good drainage. And so when we add water to these potted plants, the water goes through the top, down and out the bottom. And every time you're watering, you're pulling fresh air in behind it. So you water enough to thoroughly soak it, but also to pull fresh air in behind it. Because again, that's, the key most important thing with roots is that they breathe oxygen. That's a problem with planting plants too deep too, right? If we plant it by a tree and we plant it way down deep in a hole, it can't breathe. It's way down. It's got to be up, like way up right near the surface where the roots can breathe. We talk a lot about planting trees proud, so the roots are right on the surface. And I know a lot of times people get freaked out. Oh, the roots are sticking out. It's like, yeah, it's awesome. They can breathe. Don't put them down so deep that they're suffocating. And that's something, I don't know, a lot of people know that. Some people don't. In these cases, what I do with a containerized plant is I make sure I don't water it if it's already wet. If it's soggy wet, I'll try to skip that watering and check the next day. Always let your containerized plants dry between waterings, and that includes houseplants, right? So now we're going to move on to some of the effects of climate change. And this is, again, I think this is a good sort of opportunity to talk about this, because we all know we've been having these issues with forest fires and that sort of thing locally. And, it's kind of a bit of a mystery, I think, sometimes. But remember that higher temperatures mean that the air can hold more water. So that means that the air is sucking up water and absorbing it out of the earth. It's evaporating it off the surfaces, evaporating it out of the lakes. When it rains, sometimes less water hits the ground. So, these are all factors that are affecting this. So the higher the temperature, the more water goes into the atmosphere. So if you're a plant that is made of mostly water, you're probably going to dry out. You're going to dry out way faster, actually. So you're going to have this issue where you're going to have a little bit of a tough time. I can notice it when I drive through the wilderness, because I can just see it on the trees, that they get stressed out. And so, lack of water is happening because the plants are using way more water, but it's not sticking. So we also have to be cognizant of that fact that the hotter it is, the more water is getting sucked up into the atmosphere. So these evaporation rates are very, very high. So I don't know what we can really do about that other than there's a few techniques that we'll talk about with the vegetable gardening for sure. And one of the other things, I brought this picture up just for an interest sake, and it's a picture of Hungatonga, the volcanic islands down in the South Pacific, and they had this an underwater volcanic eruption that happened in 2022. It started in 2021, but it really blew its top on the 15th of January 2022. And what this did, and this was interesting because the statistics I think, are kind of funny because I don't know why people do this, but they said that it has pushed 66 million Olympic swimming pools of water into the upper atmosphere. And I'm thinking, like we all know, what's an Olympic swimming pool? Like, is that like 700 gallons or is that like 7,000 gallons? It's a lot of water, right? That's what they're saying. So instead of saying, 66 million Olympic swimming pools of water, they could have said a lot of water. So what happens is because water is the strongest element affecting global warming, and heating up the atmosphere, that the more water and humidity we put up there, the hotter and warmer it gets. And so this happening is the reason why right now the weather is the way it is. So they're saying you get about 3 years of effect from that one blast and affecting the whole planet. So from my standpoint, I thought, well, that's not bad. At least maybe there's an end to it. After 3 years or so, it might come back sort of to semi-normal, and it's all about the jet stream and the way the jet stream works. And so right now, we're in a real warm situation, and the wind's not blowing hardly at all. I mean, we do burning sometimes, like in some slash burning and whatnot, and we just can't burn because there's no burn days because there's no air movement. So we had only 3. Today was a burn day. So 4 days now since last October, and that's just because of this. It's all because of this one volcano. So it happened. It's called a submarine volcano. So it's underwater and it shot up right into the atmosphere. So other volcanoes that are above the ground, they would be just shooting ash everywhere, which may not be super good either, but at least, it doesn't affect the weather. It might be cooling rather than warming. So anyway, what that means is we have to start using shade cloth in our gardens. After this last year, we saw how hot it was. And this year, 2024, will be probably hotter than last year. And because of the El Nino and a bunch of other things going on. So shade cloth is fabulous. There's all kinds of options available. Now, we were looking at insect cloth, and we were looking at their applications for insect protection, but these don't really protect against insects. Maybe if they were red, maybe that would be a good idea. So you could combine a shade cloth with a red color. The holes are too big in these, it lets the insects through. But again, if it was red, did I just invent something? I think I did. Okay. Anyway, I'm thinking that the shade cloth material is awesome, and particularly in the afternoon, right? So like in my garden to the west, I know which way is west. So when I set up my shade cloth, I'll have sort of a steep angle like that because I still want direct sunlight in the morning. I want it to be, we're just talking midsummer here, right? Because in the spring, you need every bit of sun you can get on your garden until you get into, well, for us here, probably by the time we're into June or so, we're going to need to start thinking about shade right through the summer, but only in the afternoon. So there you go. But 50% shade. When you buy shade cloth, and I'm not sure, I don't know what garden centers are selling what. I don't know if they sell shade cloth. Maybe they do. I know you can buy it off of online sources and that sort of thing. But when you buy shade cloth, it has a rating on it. It says, 25%, 30%, 40, 50, 60, 70% shade, 80%, sometimes up to 80% shade. So ideally for vegetables, is about 50% is about right. That sort of gets you that perfect sweet spot, and it's just going to break. Vegetables are a high light plant. They need a lot of heat. But the one thing that is really good, it's always great. It really does help to preserve water as well, because in the afternoon, like, it all evaporates away. So if you can shade it a bit, it's helpful. But it prevents sun scald. So does everybody see sun scald on their vegetables? You might see like a big white spot on the side of say a pepper or a tomato or something. You get that big blotch, and that's just sun scald. So the sun's getting sunburned, really. So utilizing shade cloth is really the way to go. And like I say, hey, I guess I better talk to the shade cloth guys. See if we can get some red shade cloth that's just a little bit finer. All right, so 50% is about right. There's so many different ways you can apply it on hoops or on a rack. I like to see it up above the plant somewhere so that I can still put my insect screens on the beds, and then just have sort of a big shade cloth for afternoon heat. There's the insect mesh again. And again, makeshift is fine, whatever works, but literally 100% no insects. And the insect mesh should be red, as I mentioned. And yeah, absolutely. So insect cloth has very little, if any, sun reduction. So about probably 5% to 7%, somewhere in that range. So it does a little bit, but it's really not enough to really reduce the heat. So water management and conservation is really important. We really have to watch things. So we're using drip lines predominantly for vegetables now. So we'll run drip lines so the water goes straight into the soil rather than being sprayed up into the air where it's going to evaporate away. Preserving it in some sort of rain barrel is not a bad idea. The only issue is that here in the Okanagan, we don't get enough rain to do much. I think the key is with rainwater storage is that when it does rain, you want to capture all of it, because sometimes in a torrential downpour, if you're getting a real massive downpour, you can get a lot of water all at once, and if you can capture that, you're doing great. The only thing to note is that with regular irrigation systems, especially on lawns, because lawns are the big culprit, they use a lot of water. So average nightly usage in one night would be somewhere around 1,200 to 1,500 gallons of water. It would be typical for a lot of irrigation systems. And the way to calculate that is that you're allowed to use a maximum of 10 gallons per minute in any irrigation system that's not on the outskirts of town, or this is not a farm system or something. But in most communities, it's 10 gallons per minute. So if my irrigation system runs for 120 minutes times 10, that's how many gallons you've used. So it's very quick to calculate. And now it's usually less than that, because 10 gallons is the maximum you can use. Most systems run about 8 to 10 gallons per minute. So really nice to have, but you can see the issue when you start calculating it. It's like, so if I save all this water, I can irrigate for one night. It's like, yeah. So I use it for using with hand watering and that sort of thing. There's a lot of uses for it, and like I say, depending on the size of your water storage, because you can make them as big as you want nowadays with all the different techniques of water storage. But yeah, I really think it's great. The rainwater is superior to most of the water that we get so far. And, groundwater issues are an issue. The aquifers all over the whole planet basically are being depleted. So, utilizing some rainwater is probably a good idea. Soil management. So, it's going to be hot out. So remember the Dust Bowl of the 30s. For anybody who's seen the documentaries, or I don't know if anybody's alive who was there, but quite a frightening situation when all the soil blows into the atmosphere. But the key really with that is preserving the soil from eroding by using plant material, like living plants of some sort, and applications of surface mulches. We were talking earlier there about surface mulch and how important it is. It's just critical in holding the moisture in the ground and helping to keep everything where it's put. And so it's just the worst possible scenario is when it's super hot out and the wind is blowing. Like, talk about desiccation. It just dries the plants right out. So yeah, it's one of these things. If you have nice compost on the surface, the sun is not drying out the water, the evaporation rate is greatly reduced, the moisture holding ability is tremendous. You only need up to about 3 inches of mulch. It's about all you need. It does need to be replenished, of course, but it really works good. I just avoid the use of bark. Some types of bark are maybe Douglas fir bark, which is actually a really good product when it comes to like making potting soil. Like, if you were like one of the best, like, we're talking about potting soil being, a new sort of a new frontier in a way now. But Douglas fir bark is known as the best bark for making soil. So once you compost it, break it down till it's black and crush it all up, just beautiful, makes really nice potting soil. So we might see Douglas fir bark potting soil in the future. But and that was because like years ago, I used to go to seminars, I don't know, 5 or 6 a year on all different types of things. And the one thing this was all about was potting soils and different products and all the different types of wood products that they broke down and composted and used and tested to see what was the best for plants. And it turned out Douglas fir was the best. The problem with Douglas fir bark, if you ever see it, and when it's in your landscape, is it's full of little droplets of pitch, which is super flammable, right? So I'm just a little, a little nervous about that. I don't mind using compost as a surface mulch because that is a product that's broken down and it's much less flammable. So, all right, so we're just going to run out of time. We're going to go through this real quick. So, soil structure and texture, all different types of soil. To break it down really quick for you, it's all about these air spaces in the soil. So if in order to get air spaces in your soil, you can't really be disturbing it very much. So you can't be like digging it. Digging is okay, but not rototilling. So what the earth is all about is these access tubes in the ground where the air is. I keep saying about how roots breathe oxygen, and this perfect scenario of having air in there. So if I have a plant that dies in the garden, I just snip it off the surface and I leave the roots. And those roots are in there and they go down, and wherever they go, who knows? But now when those roots decompose, now their little air tubes go down, right? So it's real beneficial to have those dead roots in there. And then also, fungus is a key thing. So fungus, we all know, you'll see everything you buy, seems a lot of things, it says it has mycorrhizae fungus in it. And this is something you can add to your garden, right? So the thing with mycorrhizae fungus is it helps the plants, it grows on the roots and extends the size of the root system so the plants can survive nicely and better and healthier because they have bigger root systems. But this occurs naturally if you just leave it alone. But as soon as you rototill, that's toast. It kills all those. It kills a lot of those. It takes another year or 2 or 3, sometimes up to 3 years, to get that fungus back into a healthy situation. So Charles Dowding's the guy, I really love his videos on YouTube, so I highly recommend just checking those out. He's a great gardener. He's from England, and he's got all kinds of great information, but he's a no-dig guy. So that means you don't dig the garden, you just smooth it out each spring, put 2 to 3 inches of compost over it, and plant straight into it. And you do that every year. So it's a heck of a lot easier than digging. And this is assuming that you have a bit of garden soil to start with, like, say 12 to 18 inches would be nice. So in raised beds, that's a little bit easier to do. But Charles has got many videos that he talks about and shows you how to do. He takes examples where he just goes out into a lawn and cuts a chunk of the grass out. Some place he just puts it right on top of the grass, and then he puts a piece of cardboard down, piles soil on it, and starts planting, and away they go. So, but it's these things we talked about. Understanding soil porosity and how much food plants need. Vegetables need the most food of any plants. So that's because when soil is friable, that's when it's like full of little beads. Those are electrically charged particles that are gluing themselves together. So I've watched something else on YouTube, and they were saying how it was stickiness in the soil or something gluing the particles together, but it's really electrical charge as positives and negatives. So the positives and negatives make the soil little beads. And the only thing that's better than the beads are the PEDs. So when you get a bunch of this friable soil, that's the farmer's term, is friable soil. Nice little beads and crumbs, right? And when they get really good, they start to stick together and they form these PEDs. And if you can get PEDs, it's like, wow. So what the glue is organic matter. It's compost, because compost has the strongest electrical charge of just about anything, even more than clay. Clay has a high electrical charge as well. So these particles all glue themselves together. And what happens is there's little spaces all between the particles. And what's in between those spaces? Oxygen, air, water too, because the water has to have somewhere to go. It needs to be able to get in there. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So then we put all the pieces together, and we know that humic acid is really the secret to all plant material and life, as it is for most plants. So plants just love it. Compost makes humus. Humic acid is that black oozy stuff that comes off of the compost. And the humic acid dissolves and coats the nutrients that might be minerals in the soil, things that are already there. Or maybe you put fertilizer down, it'll coat those too. And because it's acid, it breaks those particles down, and it makes them sort of slippery and super easy to absorb through the cell walls of the plants, including into the root systems. So just love humic acid, and that's where people who use a lot of compost have a lot of success. All right, so we have to watch out for AI. We keep hearing about it. Ooh, AI is coming. It is actually coming really quickly. So within 5 years, everything will change. Everything will be different. Like signage in nurseries, everything that if you went into nursery, I think for plant people, it'll be a really good thing. If you're a non-technology person, that's okay. But when you go into the nursery, you'll be able to just scan any sign, and it'll automatically tell you all about the plant, show you videos of it in the land where it grows, and all the information about it. So it'll be a real advantage to plant people, and plant information will be easily available on your cell phone at any time. And it'll just become normalized so that everybody will just think, oh, this is easy, And, oh yeah, Ken's talking tonight, but I got it on my phone. I'm good. I'm not going. So, this is sort of the way that goes. So sometimes, we may lose our jobs over it. So it goes. But robots, there's all kinds of robots. And this is in the whole industry of growing vegetables and plants, is that almost all the big operations, they're all run already with robots. But it's not like robots like you see, like humanoid looking things. It's just machines that will run automatically and do their job and be able to do a really consistent job, work 24 hours a day without any pauses or anything. So these are robots in the picture here that use light to kill insects and pests and that sort of thing. So it's kind of a cool thing. It's just the way it's going to go. And again, because it's just, the ultimate organic approach, there's really no chemicals used. I think it's a good thing. But I also, I don't like the use of chemicals when people actually have to go out there and handle them to use it. It's one thing when you dilute it down and spray it over an acre or something, but the person who's standing there has to deal with it. So robots will gladly do that and not have any issues, and they can do it at night or anytime. It doesn't matter. So, and they can automatically tell if it's too windy, which is always a bad thing when it comes to chemicals, right? You don't want to be spraying when it's windy out, right? So, but these machines have a wind sensor on them. If it's windy, they just stop, wait for it to not be windy. So it's really nice. You set the attributes into the machines, and away they go. So there you go. So things are turning silver out there, including me. So the silver look of the leaf is fine hairs, and those fine hairs mean the plant is drought tolerant. In most cases, that's the case. So when you see plants that are silvery, they really don't need much water. So it's just a real quick way of identifying. Now, there's lots of plants that are drought tolerant that are not necessarily silver, but it's something we look for. And personally, I really like the effect of the monoculture, sort of mono effect. So you get a huge area with all plants that are all silver, and you're really working with textures more than anything. I think it looks really cool. But again, there's very little water needed, and they're pretty self-sufficient. So it's things we're going to be looking at. The creeping times, there's so many different types of thyme out there. And the most popular sought after plant of 2023 was red creeping thyme, which is really strange. And to me, it's a bit strange just because we've been selling that plant for 40 years. It's been just very common, but here, still quite popular. Good for pollinators too. Yeah, so other good plants, there's lots of good plants, and Siri covered a bunch of them. Fabulous group of plants, and just a few oddball ones, some different types of lavenders. I really like the new lavenders. Are more compact, dwarf, and longer blooming, and just easier to manage. They don't get too big. And the Nepeta group is now quite expanded. And the top right-hand picture is the cat's pajamas. Of course, Nepeta is the cat mint is what they call it as a common name, even though I don't think the cats like it too much. But still, it's related to cat mint, and it just blooms literally all the time. It just blooms and blooms from about the end of May right through until into September, and drought tolerant, deer resistant, just good plants, and well behaved, stays tiny. So you'll see a lot of these Nepetas that have cats' names. A whole bunch of them plays on the word cat. So there you go. And dwarf Russian sage, also very cool plants. Just stays small and compact, no water needed, and tough as nails. Lots of good ones. So yeah, and just plants are plants, but you notice that silver color is indicating the drought tolerance, except for echinacea. So echinacea is just a beautiful blast of color. All these new hybrids available that bloom and bloom and bloom. And the only thing I'll say about echinaceas for gardeners out there is get them in early, and so they get well established before winter comes, because they may not survive the winter if they're planted too late. Some do, but a lot of them don't. So you need to get them well established before winter hits. All right, so there you go. My tips in summary: just really keep on learning. There's so much to learn out there, and there's tons of opportunity to research things online, and check out growercoach.com. We have classes and all kinds of things on there, courses you can take. Water conservation is going to be number one this year. New technology. Some of these things will bounce their way down into our gardens, and some will be, maybe only available to the commercial growers. New information is always coming to light every day. I look through these lists. I get on these lists from Holland and Italy, and these articles come through daily, and they're just discovering new stuff every day. It's just amazing. Rust diseases. Rust is one of the things very difficult to control and manage. Brutal. Well, they can control it now. They've got a product that they can just kill it when it's ready in its stage. Don, you remember how many times we battled with rust problems, right? All right, so that's basically it. Thanks so much, you guys. Remember to check growercoach.com, and check us out on YouTube, Grower Coach on YouTube, and please like and subscribe. Thank you. Thanks so much.